The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., but Zora Williams had been awake since 4:45, rehearsing answers to potential interview questions in her head. She slipped out of bed carefully, avoiding the creaky floorboard that might wake 6-year-old Amora, who was finally sleeping peacefully after a night of coughing. Their one-bedroom apartment in South Chicago felt especially small this morning. The kitchen counter doubled as Zora's makeup station, interview outfit hanging from the shower rod to steam out wrinkles while she bathed. Every detail mattered today. "This is it," she whispered to her reflection, applying mascara with precision despite the flickering bathroom light. Westbrook Financial. Benefits. Stability. The words had become her mantra over the past week. After 3 months of rejections, this administrative assistant position represented more than just employment. It was healthcare for Amora's asthma, an apartment without mold, maybe even a savings account someday. Zora smoothed her braids into a neat bun, professional but not severe. The navy blue blazer she'd found at Goodwill fit perfectly after her neighbor Miss Claudette had taken in the sleeves. 32 years old, with a community college degree and a resume full of gaps from when Amora's health had required her full attention, Zora knew the odds weren't in her favor. But determination ran in her blood. "Mommy." Amora appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her favorite stuffed elephant dragging behind her. "Baby girl, what are you doing up?" Zora knelt down, pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead. "No fever. Good. I wanted to see you all dressed up." Amora's smile revealed a new gap where her front tooth had been. "You look like a queen." Zora laughed, the sound easing some of the tension in her shoulders. "Well, thank you, Princess Amora. Now, remember what we talked about? Miss Claudette is coming over in 30 minutes to take you to school, and then she'll pick you up after. I might be a little late tonight because you're getting a big girl job that's gonna make everything better," Amora finished, nodding solemnly. Something caught in Zora's throat. "That's the plan. But no matter what happens, you and me, we're already everything we need, right?" "Right." Amora wrapped her arms around Zora's neck, smelling of sleep and the lavender detangler they'd used last night. "But can we still get ice cream if you get the job?" "That's definitely part of the plan." Zora stood, checking her watch. "Let's get you dressed. I need to catch the 7:15 train to make it downtown on time." The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency: oatmeal with cinnamon for Amora, a granola bar and travel mug of coffee for Zora. Miss Claudette arrived right on time, her silver hair wrapped in a colorful scarf. "Look at you," the older woman said, giving Zora an appraising nod. "They'd be fools not to hire you on the spot." "From your lips to God's ears," Zora replied, gathering her portfolio and the emergency inhaler she always kept in her purse. "Amora's lunch is in the fridge, and there's." "Child, I've been watching this little one since she was in diapers. We'll be just fine." Miss Claudette shooed her toward the door. "You focus on knocking their socks off." With a final kiss to Amora's cheek and a whispered "I love you," Zora stepped out into the crisp October morning, her breath forming small clouds in the air. The interview was at 9 a.m. If the trains ran on schedule, she'd arrive with 20 minutes to spare, enough time to collect herself before walking into Westbrook Financial's gleaming downtown offices. Across town, in a sprawling Tudor-style home in Oak Park, Harold Westbrook struggled to knot his tie. At 78, his fingers didn't cooperate the way they once had, especially on mornings when the arthritis flared up. Today was particularly bad. "Damn it all," he muttered, abandoning the effort and shuffling toward the kitchen. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from Eleanor's parents 53 years ago. 2 years since Eleanor had passed, and still, every morning, he expected to find her at the kitchen counter, reading glasses perched on her nose as she worked the crossword puzzle. Instead, there was only the empty kitchen, immaculate and untouched. Harold hadn't cooked a proper meal since the funeral. His daughter, Patricia, had arranged for meal deliveries, but he often forgot to eat them, the plastic containers piling up in the refrigerator until his weekly housekeeper disposed of them. The coffee maker, one of those complicated machines Patricia had insisted on, beeped to signal the completion of his morning brew. He poured a cup with shaking hands, spilling some onto the counter. Another mess for Mariana to clean when she came tomorrow. Harold's gaze fell on the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. October 15th was circled in red, board meeting, 10 a.m. Though he had stepped down as CEO of Westbrook Financial 5 years ago, he remained chairman of the board, a position his son-in-law Richard had been not so subtly suggesting he relinquish. "Just focus on enjoying your golden years, Dad," Richard would say, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "The company's in good hands." But Harold wasn't ready to let go completely. Westbrook Financial had been his life's work, built from nothing after he returned from Vietnam with nothing but determination and the business degree he'd earned on the GI Bill. Eleanor had been by his side through it all. The lean years, the risks, the eventual success. The company was his legacy, his connection to her. He glanced at his watch, 8:15 a.m. The driver Patricia insisted on would arrive at 9 o'clock to take him downtown. Plenty of time to finish his coffee and attempt the tie again. As Harold raised the mug to his lips, a sharp pain lanced through his chest, radiating down his left arm. The mug slipped from his grasp, shattering on the tile floor as he clutched at the counter for support. "Not now," he gasped, fumbling in his pocket for the nitroglycerine tablets his doctor had prescribed. His fingers closed around the small pill bottle, but as he tried to open it, another wave of pain hit, stronger this time. The room tilted sideways, and Harold felt his knees buckle. As consciousness began to fade, his last coherent thought wasn't of the company or the board meeting, but of Eleanor. How disappointed she would be if he died alone on their kitchen floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee. What do you think would happen if Zora and Harold's paths crossed on this fateful morning? Have you ever had a moment where missing an appointment led to something unexpected? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Zora's train pulled into the station right on schedule. She checked her watch, 8:25 a.m. Perfect timing. The crisp autumn air filled her lungs as she navigated the busy sidewalks, mentally rehearsing her elevator pitch one more time. 7 years of administrative experience, proficient in all Microsoft Office applications, excellent organizational skills. She murmured under her breath, dodging a businessman too engrossed in his phone to watch where he was walking. Westbrook Financial was located in a sleek glass tower just 3 blocks from the station. Zora had researched the route meticulously, even doing a practice run last weekend with Amora in tow. "This is where Mommy might work," she had told her daughter, both of them gazing up at the imposing building that seemed to touch the clouds. As she rounded the corner onto Oak Street, Zora noticed a commotion up ahead. A small crowd had gathered outside a row of brownstones that housed various businesses and upscale apartments. An elderly man was slumped on the steps of one building, his face ashen, a spilled grocery bag at his feet. "Someone call 911. A woman was shouting, while others stood by, phones out, some filming rather than helping. Zora hesitated, glancing at her watch again, 8:32 a.m. She still had plenty of time to make her interview. This wasn't her problem. Someone else would help. But as she tried to walk past, the old man looked up, his eyes meeting hers. The naked fear and pain in his gaze stopped her cold. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the street noise. "My pills, in my pocket, can't open." Before she could second-guess herself, Zora was kneeling beside him, her interview portfolio tucked under one arm. "Sir, I'm going to help you, okay?" Her voice was calm, steadier than she felt. "Where are your pills?" His trembling hand gestured toward his jacket pocket. Zora carefully reached in and found a small prescription bottle. The label read nitroglycerine. Take 1 tablet under tongue as needed for chest pain. With practiced fingers, the same ones that had opened countless child-proof medicine bottles for Amora, she twisted the cap off and shook out a tiny pill. "Under your tongue," she instructed, gently placing it there when his shaking hands couldn't manage the task. "I'm going to call an ambulance now." "Already called," the man gasped, color slowly returning to his face as the medication began to work. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Zora. Zora Williams." She kept her fingers on his wrist, counting his pulse the way she'd learned to do during Amora's worst asthma attacks. "Harold Westbrook," he replied, his breathing still labored but less desperate. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped." The name registered dimly in Zora's mind, but she was too focused on the situation to place it. "Just rest, Mr. Westbrook. Help is coming." In the distance, sirens wailed. Zora glanced at her watch, 8:47 a.m. A flutter of panic rose in her chest. The interview was at 9 o'clock, and she was still at least 10 minutes from the building, even if she left right now. Harold seemed to sense her distress. "You're in a hurry," he observed, his voice stronger now. "I have a job interview," she admitted, torn between her responsibility to this vulnerable stranger and the opportunity that could change her and Amora's lives. "Go," Harold said, gesturing weakly. "The ambulance is almost here." Zora bit her lip, looking from Harold to the direction of Westbrook Financial and back again. The crowd had thinned, most people continuing on their way once the immediate drama had passed. The woman who had called 911 was still there, but she was on her phone now, seemingly distracted. "I can't leave you alone," Zora decided, even as her heart sank. "Not until the paramedics arrive." The ambulance pulled up 3 minutes later, but by then it was 8:52 a.m. Even if she ran, Zora wouldn't make it to Westbrook Financial by 9 o'clock. As the paramedics loaded Harold onto a stretcher, he reached for her hand. "Come with me," he said, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who had just suffered what appeared to be a heart attack. "Please." "Sir, I can't." "I'm frightened," he admitted, vulnerability etching deeper lines into his already weathered face. "My wife would have been with me, but she's gone now. There's no one else." The raw loneliness in his voice struck a chord in Zora. How many times had she faced scary medical situations with Amora, wishing desperately for someone, anyone, to hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay? "Are you family?" one of the paramedics asked, clipboard in hand. Before Zora could answer, Harold spoke up. "Yes, she's with me." The lie hung in the air between them. Zora could correct it, walk away, perhaps call Westbrook Financial and explain the situation, beg for a rescheduled interview. Or she could honor this unspoken pact with a stranger who needed her. "I'm coming," she said, climbing into the ambulance after Harold. As the doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, she watched Westbrook Financial's gleaming tower recede in the distance, along with her hopes for a better future. In the sterile brightness of the ambulance, Harold's eyes found hers again. "You missed something important for me," he said, his voice tinged with regret. Zora managed a small smile. "Sometimes people are more important than appointments." "Not many believe that anymore," Harold replied, wincing as the paramedic inserted an 4-line. "What was the interview for?" "Administrative assistant at Westbrook Financial," Zora answered, the irony of the situation not lost on her. "I've been trying to find stable work for months. I have a daughter, Amora. She's 6. Something flickered in Harold's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or simply pain from his condition. Before he could respond, the paramedic interrupted with questions about his medical history, and the moment passed. As the ambulance weaved through morning traffic, Zora sent a quick text to Miss Claudette explaining that she'd be late, then another to the HR contact at Westbrook Financial, apologizing for missing the interview due to a medical emergency. She didn't expect a response from the latter. Companies like that had dozens of candidates lined up. Her absence would barely register as a blip in their day. At the hospital, everything happened in a blur. Harold was whisked away for tests, while Zora was directed to a waiting area. She should leave, she knew. There was nothing more she could do here. Harold was in good hands, and she needed to figure out her next steps, call more employment agencies, perhaps. Yet something kept her rooted to the uncomfortable plastic chair. Perhaps it was the memory of Harold's frightened eyes, or maybe it was simply that she had nowhere else to be now that her interview was lost. Either way, she found herself waiting, flipping through outdated magazines and wondering how this detour would affect the carefully constructed plans she'd made for her and Amora's future. 2 hours later, a doctor approached her. "Are you here for Mr. Westbrook?" Zora nodded, setting aside the magazine she hadn't really been reading. "He's stable. It was a mild heart attack, but given his age and history, we're keeping him for observation. He's asking for you." Following the doctor down a corridor of identical rooms, Zora tried to make sense of the day's events. By now, she should have been either celebrating a successful interview or nursing her wounds after a rejection. Instead, she was walking into the hospital room of a complete stranger who had somehow become her responsibility. Harold looked smaller in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. But his eyes were alert, and some color had returned to his face. "You stayed," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "I stayed," Zora confirmed, taking a seat in the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like a fool," Harold admitted. "I forgot to take my medication this morning. Been forgetting a lot of things lately." He paused, studying her face. "You said your interview was at Westbrook Financial." Zora nodded, a pang of regret twisting in her stomach. "Yes, But it's okay. There will be other opportunities. Harold's laugh was unexpected, a dry chuckle that turned into a cough. Young lady, do you know who I am? Confused, Zora shook her head. Should I? Harold Westbrook, founder and chairman of Westbrook Financial. He gestured weakly at himself, though not looking particularly impressive at the moment. The realization hit Zora like a physical blow. She had missed her interview at Westbrook Financial, because she was helping the founder of Westbrook Financial. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. I had no idea, she stammered, suddenly self-conscious about her wrinkled blazer and scuffed shoes. Obviously, Harold replied, his eyes twinkling with unexpected mirth. Otherwise you might have left me on those steps to improve your chances. Despite everything, Zora found herself laughing, a release of tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That's terrible. But possibly true, Harold countered. The world's a competitive place. His expression sobered. You sacrificed an opportunity that was important to you to help a stranger. That says more about your character than any interview could. Before Zora could respond, the door opened, and a well-dressed woman in her 50s burst in, followed by a man in an expensive suit. Dad! The woman exclaimed, rushing to Harold's bedside. Richard just told me. Why didn't you call us immediately? Hello, Patricia, Harold said, his tone noticeably cooler. I was a bit preoccupied with not dying. The woman, Patricia, turned to Zora, noticing her for the first time. And who is this? In that moment, standing before Harold's clearly wealthy daughter in her second-hand clothes, Zora felt the full weight of the worlds that separated them. She didn't belong here, in this room, in this situation. I'm just someone who helped your father, she said, gathering her portfolio. I should go now. No. Harold's voice was firm, commanding even from his hospital bed. Patricia, Richard, this is Zora Williams. She saved my life today, and in doing so, missed a job interview at our company. He fixed his gaze on the man, Richard, apparently. I believe we owe her at least a conversation, don't you? Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Harold. We're very grateful for Ms. Williams' assistance. He turned to Zora, extending a business card. Perhaps you could come by the office tomorrow? Say, 2 p.m. Zora accepted the card, her mind spinning. Was this really happening? Yes, thank you. I'll be there. As she left the hospital room, the weight of the day's events finally hit her. She had missed what she thought was her last chance, only to potentially gain something even better. But as she glanced back through the door's window, seeing Harold now surrounded by his family, she wondered if the opportunity would still exist once she was out of sight. Have you ever experienced a moment where an act of kindness seemed to cost you something important? Did the universe ever surprise you with unexpected returns on your compassion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The next morning, Zora stared at Richard Westbrook's business card on her kitchen counter, turning it over in her fingers as doubt crept in. The embossed lettering caught the early sunlight. Richard Westbrook, Chief Executive Officer, Westbrook Financial. What's that, Mommy? Amora asked, mouthful of cereal. Don't talk with your mouth full, baby, Zora said automatically. It's just a business card. From the man I'm meeting today. After leaving the hospital yesterday, Zora had picked up Amora from school, trying to mask her conflicting emotions. She'd told her daughter a simplified version of events, that she'd helped someone who needed it and missed her interview, but might get another chance. She'd left out the part about Harold Westbrook being the founder of the company. It felt too much like a fairy tale, the kind of coincidence that happened in movies but never in real life. Are you going to get the job? Amora asked, eyes wide with hope. Zora sighed, tucking the card into her purse. I don't know, sweetie. It's complicated. The truth was, Zora had spent half the night convincing herself that the meeting was probably just a courtesy, a wealthy family's way of saying thank you before sending her on her way. People like the Westbrooks didn't actually invite people like her into their world. Not permanently. Miss Claudette says when grown-ups say it's complicated, they're usually scared, Amora observed, scraping the last of her cereal from the bowl. Out of the mouths of babes. Zora smiled despite herself. Miss Claudette is a very wise woman. And yes, Mommy is a little scared. But that's okay. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you do what you need to do anyway. After dropping Amora at school, Zora spent the morning at the public library, researching Westbrook Financial more thoroughly. The company had started as a small investment firm in the 1970s and grown into a financial services powerhouse with offices in 12 cities. Harold Westbrook was something of a legend in Chicago business circles, known for his shrewd investments but also for his ethical standards in an industry not always associated with morality. His daughter, Patricia Westbrook Collins, served as chief operating officer. And Richard Collins, Harold's son-in-law, had been CEO for the past 5 years, though Harold remained chairman of the board. The company employed over 3,000 people and managed billions in assets. Zora closed the browser window, feeling smaller than ever. What could a company like that possibly want with her? She had an associate's degree from a community college and a resume full of administrative jobs interrupted by periods of unemployment when Amora's health had required her full attention. By the time 2 p.m. approached, Zora had nearly talked herself out of going. But Amora's words echoed in her mind. Being brave means you do what you need to do anyway. She'd said those words to her daughter countless times during hospital visits and breathing treatments. Now it was time to live by them. The Westbrook Financial Building was just as imposing up close as it had been from a distance. Zora smoothed her blazer, the same one she'd worn yesterday, freshly steamed this morning, and approached the security desk in the lobby. "I have an appointment with Richard Collins," she said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Zora Williams." The security guard checked his computer, then handed her a visitor's badge. 42nd floor. The receptionist will direct you. The elevator ride gave Zora time to collect herself, to rehearse what she would say. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very interested in working for your company. I have experience in..." The words felt hollow, rehearsed. Because they were. The 42nd floor opened into a reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. A sleek-looking woman at the desk greeted her with a practiced smile. "Ms. Williams? Mr. Collins is expecting you. This way, please." She was led not to an interview room, as she'd expected, but to a large corner office where Richard Collins sat behind an imposing desk. He rose when she entered, offering a handshake that was firm but brief. "Ms. Williams. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Zora sat, acutely aware of the disparity between them. His tailored suit probably cost more than her rent. "How is Mr. Westbrook doing?" she asked, genuinely concerned despite her nervousness. Something flickered across Richard's face. Annoyance? "Harold is recovering well. The doctors expect to release him tomorrow." He leaned back in his chair. "He speaks very highly of you." "I didn't do anything special," Zora said honestly. "Anyone would have helped." "But they didn't. You did." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Harold seems to think this was fate. That you're missing the interview here to help him was some kind of sign." The way he said it made it clear he didn't share this view. "I don't know about fate," Zora replied carefully. "But I do believe things happen for a reason sometimes." Richard nodded, as if she'd confirmed something for him. "Harold has asked that we offer you a position here at Westbrook Financial. As a personal favor to him." The words should have thrilled her, but the way Richard delivered them, like he was describing an unpleasant obligation, made Zora's stomach tighten. "I appreciate that," she said slowly. "But I wouldn't want a position I haven't earned." "Admirable," Richard replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "The position would be as an executive assistant in Harold's office. He still maintains a presence here, though his role is largely ceremonial these days." Ceremonial. The dismissiveness in Richard's voice was unmistakable. "I see," Zora said, trying to keep her expression neutral. "And what would the responsibilities entail?" "Managing Harold's schedule, correspondence, some light research. Nothing too demanding." Richard slid a folder across the desk. "The salary and benefits package outlined here. It's generous." Zora opened the folder and nearly gasped. The salary was almost twice what she'd expected from the administrative assistant position she'd originally applied for. The benefits included comprehensive health insurance that would cover all of Amora's medical needs. It was everything she'd been fighting for. So why did it feel wrong? "This is very generous," she acknowledged, closing the folder. "But I'm curious. Why me? Surely there are more qualified candidates." Richard's smile tightened. Harold was quite insistent. He believes you have qualities that can't be taught. Integrity, compassion. He said the words like they were foreign concepts. And frankly, it's easier to indulge him in this than to argue. The implication was clear. This wasn't about her qualifications or potential. It was about appeasing an old man's whim. I see, Zora said again, her voice cooler now. And if I were to accept, who would I be reporting to? Mr. Westbrook directly. Technically, yes. But given Harold's limited involvement in day-to-day operations, you'd coordinate with Patricia and myself on most matters. Richard glanced at his watch. I have another meeting shortly. Do you need time to consider the offer? Every practical bone in Zora's body screamed at her to accept on the spot. This was security for Amora, an end to the constant financial struggle, a foot in the door of a prestigious company. But something held her back, the same instinct that had made her stop to help Harold yesterday. I'd like to discuss this with Mr. Westbrook directly, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. If that's possible. Richard's expression hardened momentarily before smoothing into professional neutrality. Harold is still recovering. I'm authorized to make this offer on behalf of the company. I understand, Zora replied, standing up. And I appreciate the opportunity. But I'd still like to speak with Mr. Westbrook before making my decision. For a moment, she thought Richard might refuse. Then he nodded curtly. I'll have my assistant arrange it. Harold returns home tomorrow. Perhaps the day after. Thank you. Zora extended her hand, which Richard shook with obvious reluctance. I look forward to it. As she left the gleaming tower, the folder tucked in her bag, Zora wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The practical part of her brain catalogued all the reasons she should have accepted on the spot. The salary, the benefits, the prestige, the security for Amora. But another part, the part that had stopped to help a stranger despite the cost, knew she'd made the right choice. There was something off about the whole situation, something that didn't sit right. That evening, as she helped Amora with her homework, her phone rang with an unknown number. Ms. Williams? This is Patricia Westbrook Collins, Harold's daughter. Zora's grip tightened on the phone. Yes, hello. I understand you met with Richard today and had some reservations about our offer. There was something in Patricia's voice, not the dismissiveness of Richard, but awareness, perhaps even respect. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Zora said carefully. I just wanted to speak with Mr. Westbrook directly before making a decision. A pause. My father can be impulsive, especially since my mother passed. I want to be clear that while we appreciate what you did for him, Westbrook Financial is a business, not a charity. The word stung, but Zora kept her voice steady. I'm not looking for charity, Ms. Westbrook Collins. I'm looking for an opportunity to prove my worth. Another pause, longer this time. My father would like to meet with you at his home the day after tomorrow. 2 p.m. I'll text you the address. Thank you. I'll be there. After hanging up, Zora stared at the phone, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The Westbrooks clearly operated in a world completely different from hers. A world where power and money shaped every interaction, where favors and obligations were currency. Mommy, are you okay? Amora asked, looking up from her spelling worksheet. Zora smiled, pushing aside her doubts. Yes, baby. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff. About your new job. Maybe. We'll see. That night, after Amora was asleep, Zora pulled out the folder again, studying the offer. It was everything she needed, everything she'd been working toward. So why couldn't she simply accept it? Because she wanted to earn it, she realized. Not have it handed to her out of obligation or guilt or whatever strange impulse had prompted Harold Westbrook to offer it. She'd spent her whole life fighting to be seen, to be valued for her abilities rather than judged for her circumstances. She couldn't compromise that now, not even for security. As she drifted off to sleep, Zora made a decision. She would meet with Harold Westbrook, but not to accept his charity. She would make it clear that if he wanted to hire her, it would be because she was the best person for the job, not because he felt he owed her. Little did she know that across town, in his sprawling Oak Park home, Harold Westbrook was having his own crisis of faith, questioning the company he'd built, the family that now ran it, and what legacy he truly wanted to leave behind. Have you ever been offered something that seemed too good to be true? Did you accept it, or did your instincts tell you to look deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Harold Westbrook's home in Oak Park was exactly what Zora had imagined, a stately Tudor-style mansion set back from the street, surrounded by mature oak trees now blazing with autumn colors. As the rideshare dropped her off at the gate, Zora felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. She didn't belong here, in this neighborhood of old money and privilege. But she straightened her shoulders and walked up the curved driveway anyway, her sensible heels crunching on the gravel. The door opened before she could knock, revealing a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform. "Ms. Williams? Mr. Westbrook is expecting you. Please come in." The interior was grand but not ostentatious, hardwood floors, antique furniture, walls lined with bookshelves. It felt lived in, despite its size. Family photos crowded the surfaces, most featuring a woman Zora assumed was Harold's late wife. "He's in the sunroom," the housekeeper said, leading Zora through the house. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be nice, thank you," Zora replied, trying not to gawk at her surroundings. The sunroom was a glass-enclosed space at the back of the house, overlooking a garden now preparing for winter. Harold sat in a comfortable chair, a blanket over his legs despite the room's warmth. He looked smaller than Zora remembered, more fragile, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Ms. Williams, you came." He attempted to stand, but Zora quickly gestured for him to remain seated. "Please, don't get up on my account, Mr. Westbrook." "Harold, please." He indicated the chair opposite his. "And I'll call you Zora, if that's all right. After what we've been through, formalities seem unnecessary." Zora sat, placing her purse beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you." Harold's smile was genuine, unlike his son-in-law's. "The doctors say I was lucky. If you hadn't stopped to help." "Anyone would have done the same," Zora said, the phrase becoming a reflex. "No, they wouldn't have. That's precisely the point." Harold leaned forward slightly. "I've spent 50 years in business, Zora. I've learned to read people. Most would have walked right past an old man in distress if they had somewhere important to be." The housekeeper returned with water for Zora and tea for Harold, then discreetly withdrew. "I understand you met with Richard," Harold continued, his tone shifting slightly, "and that you had reservations about our offer." Zora took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "The offer is incredibly generous, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. But you don't want charity," Harold finished for her. "You want to earn your place." Surprised by his perception, Zora nodded. "Yes, exactly. A crash from somewhere in the house interrupted her, followed by raised voices. Harold sighed, looking suddenly tired. "That would be Patricia and Richard. They insisted on being here for our meeting, though I told them it wasn't necessary." Moments later, the sunroom door opened, and Patricia strode in, Richard close behind. Unlike at the hospital, Patricia was perfectly composed today, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her designer suit impeccable. Richard looked equally polished, though there was a tightness around his eyes that suggested stress. "Ms. Williams, how nice to see you again," Patricia said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I hope we're not interrupting." "We were just getting started," Harold replied, a hint of irritation in his voice. "Perhaps you could give us a few more minutes." "Actually, Dad, there's been a development at the office that requires your immediate attention." Richard stepped forward, handing Harold a tablet. "The Meridian acquisition. There's been a complication with the regulatory approval." Harold frowned, taking the tablet reluctantly. "This couldn't wait." "I'm afraid not," Patricia said smoothly. "The board is convening an emergency meeting in an hour. We need to leave soon if we're going to make it downtown in time." Zora stood, recognizing a dismissal when she heard one. "I should go. We can reschedule." "No." Harold's voice was firm. "This meeting is important too." He looked at the tablet, then back at his daughter and son-in-law. "The Meridian situation has been developing for weeks. Another hour won't make a difference." "Dad," Patricia began, but Harold cut her off with a raised hand. "In fact," he said, his eyes suddenly gleaming with an idea, "Zora should come with us." 3 pairs of eyes stared at him in surprise. To the board meeting? Richard asked, not bothering to hide his dismay. Yes. Harold handed the tablet back to Richard. If we're considering her for a position as my executive assistant, she should see what that entails. And I could use her perspective on the Meridian situation. Her perspective. Patricia's voice rose slightly. Dad, with all due respect, Ms. Williams has no experience in corporate acquisitions or regulatory compliance. Precisely, Harold replied, as if that explained everything. She'll see things we might miss. He turned to Zora. That is, if you're willing. Zora hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. This was far beyond what she'd expected from today's meeting. A board meeting at Westbrook Financial? She was drastically underprepared, underdressed, and underqualified. But the challenge in Harold's eyes was unmistakable. This was a test, not of her financial knowledge, but of her character. Would she retreat to safety, or step into the unknown? I'd be honored, she heard herself say. Though I'm not sure how much help I can be. Excellent. Harold pushed himself to his feet with surprising energy. Richard, call the car around. Patricia, perhaps you could lend Zora a jacket? It's chilly today. Patricia's expression suggested she'd rather lend Zora her firstborn child, but she nodded stiffly. Of course. This way, Ms. Williams. As Zora followed Patricia upstairs, she caught a glimpse of Richard pulling Harold aside, their conversation intense but hushed. Whatever was happening here went beyond a simple job offer or act of gratitude. In a bedroom that clearly belonged to Patricia when she stayed over, the older woman opened a closet filled with designer clothes. These should be close to your size, she said, selecting a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than Zora's monthly rent. As Zora slipped it on, Patricia studied her with undisguised curiosity. I don't understand what my father sees in you, she said finally, her bluntness surprising. Rather than take offense, Zora met her gaze directly. Neither do I, to be honest. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed Patricia's face. He's been different since my mother died. More impulsive, sentimental. She adjusted the blazer's collar with practiced hands. Westbrook Financial isn't a family business anymore, Ms. Williams. It's a publicly traded company with responsibilities to its shareholders. I understand that, Zora replied. And I'm not looking to disrupt anything. I just need a job. Patricia stepped back, assessing her handiwork. My father thinks you're something special. Richard thinks you're an opportunist. I haven't decided yet. And what do you think matters more, your opinion or your father's? Zora asked, surprising herself with her boldness. A ghost of a smile touched Patricia's lips. That, she said, is the question of the hour. She checked her watch. We should go. The car will be waiting. The ride downtown was tense, the four of them seated in Harold's private car, Harold and Zora on one side, Patricia and Richard on the other. Richard spent most of the journey on his phone, while Patricia reviewed documents on her tablet. Harold, meanwhile, used the time to give Zora a crash course on the Meridian acquisition. Meridian Capital is a smaller firm, specializing in sustainable investments, he explained. We've been working on acquiring them for months. Their client portfolio would diversify our holdings and strengthen our position in the green energy sector. Which is why the regulatory holdup is so concerning, Richard interjected, looking up from his phone. If we can't close by the end of the quarter, we risk losing the exclusivity agreement. And our competitors will swoop in, Patricia added. Morgan Stanley has already expressed interest. Zora listened carefully, trying to absorb the unfamiliar terminology and complex dynamics. One thing was clear, beneath the corporate jargon lay a family power struggle. Harold might still be chairman, but Patricia and Richard were running the show, and they weren't entirely happy with the founders' continued involvement. At Westbrook Financial, they were escorted directly to the boardroom on the top floor. Zora had never seen anything like it, a massive table of polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago, and 12 people in expensive suits who all turned to stare as she entered with the Westbrook family. Harold, good to see you up and about, said an older man, rising to shake Harold's hand. We were concerned when we heard about your health scare. Thank you, George. Nothing keeps me down for long. Harold gestured to Zora. This is Zora Williams, my new executive assistant. She'll be sitting in today. New executive assistant? Zora kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. She hadn't accepted the position yet, and Harold knew it. What game was he playing? As they took their seats, Harold at the head of the table, Patricia and Richard to his right, Zora to his left, she felt the weight of curious stares. She was clearly an outsider here, and everyone knew it. The meeting began with Richard presenting the Meridian situation. The Regulatory Commission had concerns about market concentration and was delaying approval. Time was running out on their exclusive negotiating window. We have two options, Richard concluded. We can extend the exclusivity agreement, which will cost us an additional $5 million, or we can push for expedited review, which means more legal fees and no guarantee of success. The board members began discussing the options, throwing around terms and figures that made Zora's head spin. She remained silent, observing the dynamics around the table. Most deferred to Richard, a few to Patricia. Harold, despite his position at the head of the table, seemed almost peripheral to the conversation. Until he turned to Zora. "What do you think, Ms. Williams?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, most with barely concealed skepticism. I'm not qualified to offer an opinion on regulatory strategy, Zora said carefully. "I'm not asking for that," Harold replied. "I'm asking for your impression. As someone seeing this situation with fresh eyes." Zora took a deep breath. This was clearly another test. "Well, from what I understand, you're trying to acquire this company because they specialize in sustainable investments, correct?" Harold nodded encouragingly. "And the Regulatory Commission is concerned about market concentration. Basically, that you'll have too much control in that sector." "That's the essence of it, yes," Patricia confirmed, her expression unreadable. Zora thought for a moment. "It seems to me that if the goal is to expand into sustainable investments, there might be other ways to do that besides acquisition. Could you partner with Meridian instead? Or develop your own sustainable investment division?" A murmur ran around the table. Richard looked annoyed, but Harold was smiling. "A partnership rather than an acquisition," he mused. "That would sidestep the regulatory concerns entirely." "It would also generate less immediate value for shareholders," Richard countered. "The whole point of acquiring Meridian was to absorb their client base and expertise." "But if the acquisition fails, we get neither," Harold pointed out. "A partnership could be structured to give us first right of refusal for a full acquisition down the road, once the regulatory environment is more favorable." The discussion shifted, with board members now debating the merits of a partnership approach. Zora remained silent, acutely aware that she had somehow changed the direction of a conversation among some of Chicago's most powerful financial executives. By the end of the meeting, a consensus had formed around exploring the partnership option while continuing to pursue regulatory approval for the acquisition as a backup plan. As the board members filed out, several nodded to Zora with newfound curiosity. "Well, that was unexpected," Patricia said once they were alone in the boardroom. "Just her, Harold, Richard, and Zora. A partnership hasn't been on the table for months." "Sometimes we get too close to a problem," Harold replied. "We need fresh perspectives." He turned to Zora. "Thank you for your input. It was valuable." Richard's phone buzzed, and he checked it with a frown. "The Meridian CEO wants to meet tomorrow to discuss next steps. I'll need to prepare." He looked at Harold. "Will you be joining us?" "I think so, yes." Harold's gaze shifted to Zora. "And I'd like Zora to attend as well." Richard's objection was immediate. "Harold, with all due respect, this is a delicate negotiation. Ms. Williams has no experience in—" "She has exactly the experience we need right now," Harold interrupted. "The ability to see beyond our usual approaches." His tone made it clear the matter wasn't up for debate. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Zora and I have some matters to discuss." After Patricia and Richard reluctantly left, Harold turned to Zora with a tired smile. "I apologize for putting you on the spot like that. It wasn't entirely fair." "No, it wasn't," Zora agreed, finding her voice now that they were alone. "You introduced me as your executive assistant, but I haven't accepted the position yet." "True." Harold nodded, acknowledging the point. "I was presumptuous." "Why?" Zora asked directly. "Why me? Why all of this?" She gestured around the boardroom. I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I don't understand what's happening here. Harold was quiet for a moment, looking out at the Chicago skyline. When you reach my age, Zora, you start to think about legacy. Not just what you built, but who will carry it forward. He turned back to her. I built this company on principles, integrity, innovation, service. Somewhere along the way, under Richard's leadership, it's become something else. And you think I can change that? Zora asked incredulously. I think you represent what's been missing. Harold's gaze was steady. When you stopped to help me on the street, you didn't know who I was. You had somewhere important to be, but you put a stranger's needs first. That kind of character is rare, especially in this industry. Zora shook her head, overwhelmed. I'm just a single mom trying to provide for my daughter. I'm not on some mission to transform corporate America. Perhaps not, Harold conceded. But sometimes the most powerful changes come from people who never intended to be changemakers. He leaned forward. The position is real, Zora. Executive assistant to the chairman. The salary and benefits are as Richard outlined. But the job is more than that. I need someone I can trust as I work to ensure this company remembers its founding principles. The weight of what he was offering finally sank in. This wasn't charity. It was an alliance. What about your family? Zora asked quietly. Patricia and Richard clearly don't want me here. They'll come around, Harold said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. Or they won't. Either way, I'm still chairman of the board. Outside the boardroom windows, the afternoon sun glinted off neighboring skyscrapers. Somewhere across town, Amora was finishing her school day, unaware that her mother's life might be about to change dramatically. I need to think about this, Zora said finally. It's a lot to process. Of course. Harold nodded understanding. But I hope you'll say yes. I think we could do good work together. He glanced at his watch. The Meridian meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Whatever you decide about the position, I'd still value your presence there. As they left the boardroom, Zora felt as though she'd been swept into a current much stronger than herself. 24 hours ago, she'd been just another job seeker. Now she was walking the executive floor of Westbrook Financial, having just influenced a multi-million-dollar business decision. The elevator doors opened, and Patricia stepped out, clearly having waited for them. Dad, the car is ready to take you home, she said, then turned to Zora. Unless you'd like a ride as well, Ms. Williams. The offer seemed genuine, which surprised Zora. Thank you, but I can find my way. Actually, Harold interjected, there's something I'd like to show Zora before she leaves. Patricia, you go ahead. I'll have security call another car when we're done. Patricia looked like she wanted to object but nodded instead. Don't overexert yourself, Dad. Doctor's orders. After she left, Harold led Zora to another elevator, After Patricia left, Harold led Zora to another elevator, this one requiring a keycard to access. There's something I want to show you, he said, swiping his card. Something few people see these days. The elevator descended rather than ascending, stopping at what must have been a sub-basement level. When the doors opened, Zora was surprised to find herself in a small, well-preserved office space that looked like a time capsule from the 1970s. Wood-paneled walls, vintage furniture, and framed newspaper clippings yellowing with age. The original Westbrook Financial, Harold explained, moving slowly through the space, his hand trailing over a desk that had clearly once been his. 1 room, 2 employees, me and Eleanor, my wife. Zora followed him, taking in the humble beginnings of what had become a financial empire. You've kept it exactly as it was. As a reminder, Harold nodded, of where we started, and why. He gestured to a framed photo on the wall, a much younger Harold and a beautiful woman with kind eyes, both standing proudly in front of a small storefront. Eleanor and I opened our doors in 1972. I had just returned from Vietnam, used my GI Bill to get my business degree. We had $5,000 in savings and a loan from her father that I was determined to repay within a year. And did you? Zora asked, studying the photo. 9 months, Harold said with pride. We lived on ramen noodles and worked 18-hour days, but we did it. He moved to another photo, the same storefront, but now with a small staff of about 5 people. By 1975, We had our first employees. By 1980, our first real office building. As they moved through the preserved space, Harold continued his story, pointing out artifacts from Westbrook Financial's history. The company's first computer, a massive IBM machine. The bell they rang whenever they closed a major deal, Eleanor's desk, still arranged as if she might return to work at any moment. She was the heart of this place, Harold said softly, touching the edge of Eleanor's desk. I had the financial mind, but she had the vision. Money is just a tool, she always said. It's what you build with it that matters. Zora noticed a framed article on the wall, a profile of Eleanor Westbrook from 1992, highlighting her work establishing the Westbrook Foundation, which funded educational initiatives in underserved Chicago neighborhoods. The foundation was her passion, Harold explained, following Zora's gaze. She believed that financial literacy was the key to breaking cycles of poverty. You can give people money, she used to say, or you can teach them how to make it work for them. She sounds like an amazing woman, Zora said sincerely. She was. Harold's voice caught slightly. We were married for 53 years. When she died 2 years ago, I lost my compass in many ways. He moved to a small sitting area, lowering himself carefully onto a vintage sofa and gesturing for Zora to join him. For a moment, he was silent, gathering his thoughts. I should have retired when Eleanor did, 10 years ago, he finally continued. But I couldn't let go. The company was my identity. So I stayed on as chairman while Richard took over as CEO. It seemed like the natural succession, my daughter's husband, Harvard Business School, all the right credentials. Harold's expression darkened. But Richard has a different vision for Westbrook Financial. More aggressive, more focused on quarterly profits than long-term relationships. Patricia supports him. She always was more like me than her mother, more focused on the bottom line. Is that why you brought me to the board meeting? Zora asked. To challenge their vision. Harold smiled ruefully. Partly. But also to show them, and myself, that there are still people who embody the values Eleanor and I built this company on. People who will stop to help a stranger even when it costs them something. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small, worn leather notebook. Eleanor kept journals her whole life. After she died, I found this one from 1972, the year we started the company. He opened it carefully, turning to a marked page. She wrote, "Success will test our character more than failure ever could. When we have the power to choose profit over people, that's when we'll discover who we truly are." Harold closed the journal, his fingers lingering on its cover. I've made my share of mistakes, Zora. Chosen profit when I should have chosen people. But Eleanor always pulled me back to our core principles. He looked up, his eyes suddenly intense. The company has lost its way without her influence. Richard and Patricia see numbers where they should see lives. Zora shifted uncomfortably, the weight of Harold's implied expectations pressing on her. Mr. Westbrook, Harold, I'm honored by your confidence in me, but I'm not sure I can be what you're looking for. I'm just trying to provide for my daughter. Tell me about her, Harold said, the abrupt change of subject catching Zora off guard. Amora? She's everything to me. Despite her reservations, Zora found herself smiling. She's 6, brilliant, stubborn, brave. She has asthma. It can be severe sometimes. That's why stable health insurance is so important to me. And her father. Zora tensed slightly. Not in the picture. He left when I told him I was pregnant. Harold nodded, not pressing further. And your parents? My mother died when I was 16, cancer. My father, he did his best, but grief hit him hard. He started drinking, lost his job. I moved out at 18, put myself through community college while working 2 jobs. Zora paused, wondering why she was sharing so much with this man she barely knew. We're not close anymore. So you've been on your own for a long time, Harold observed. I've had help, Zora corrected him. Neighbors. Friends. Miss Claudette from my building watches Amora when I need to work late. We look out for each other. Community, Harold said, nodding as if she'd confirmed something important. That's what Eleanor always emphasized. Business isn't just transactions, it's relationships, community, trust. He leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. Zora, I'm not offering you this position because I feel obligated or because I think you need charity. I'm offering it because I see in you the qualities that made Westbrook Financial successful in the first place: integrity, compassion, and practical wisdom. Before Zora could respond, Harold's phone buzzed. He checked it with a frown. Patricia. Wondering where we are. He sighed, putting the phone away. She worries. Since the heart attack, they all treat me like I'm made of glass. They care about you, Zora said gently. They care about the company, Harold corrected, though without bitterness. And they're not wrong to be concerned. Westbrook Financial is my legacy. I want to leave it in good hands. As they rose to leave the preserved office, Harold paused at Eleanor's desk one more time. You know, the day I met you, the day of my attack, was Eleanor's birthday. I'd gone out to buy flowers for her grave. He smiled sadly. I forgot my medication because I was distracted, remembering. The revelation hit Zora with unexpected force. His collapse on the street took on new meaning, not just a medical emergency, but a man grieving his life partner. I'm sorry, she said simply. Don't be. If it hadn't happened, we wouldn't have met. Harold's smile turned wry. Eleanor would say it was meant to be. She believed in signs and synchronicities. I was always the skeptic, but lately. He shook his head. Lately I wonder if she wasn't right all along. As they returned to the elevator, Harold seemed to have come to a decision. The Meridian meeting tomorrow is at 10 a.m. Whether or not you decide to accept the position, I'd still value your perspective. He handed her a business card, his personal one, not the company's. My direct line. Call me tonight with your decision. The elevator doors opened on the main floor, where a security guard was waiting to escort Harold to his car. Before leaving, Harold turned to Zora one more time. Whatever you decide, thank you for stopping that day. Not everyone would have. As Zora watched him leave, she felt the weight of the choice before her. The practical benefits were clear: financial security for her and Amora, prestigious position, excellent benefits. But there were complications too. Patricia and Richard's obvious resistance. The family dynamics she'd be stepping into. And Harold's expectations, not just for an assistant, but for an ally in his quest to reshape his company's values. Outside Westbrook Financial, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plaza. Zora checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Miss Claudette. With a jolt of alarm, she called back immediately. Zora? Where have you been, child? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. I'm sorry, I was in meetings. Is Amora okay? She's fine, but the school nurse called. Her asthma was acting up, so I picked her up early. She's resting now, but I thought you should know. Relief flooded through Zora, followed by the familiar guilt of not being there when her daughter needed her. I'll come right away. No rush. She's sleeping. Her breathing is good now. Miss Claudette's voice softened. How did your meeting go? Did you get the job? It's complicated, Zora replied, flagging down a taxi. I'll tell you when I get home. During the ride back to her neighborhood, Zora's mind raced. The preserved office in the basement. Eleanor's journal. Harold's thinly veiled power struggle with his son-in-law. And through it all, Amora. The reason Zora got up every morning, the reason she couldn't afford to make mistakes. When she arrived home, she found Amora on Miss Claudette's couch, watching cartoons, her breathing even but her eyes tired. Mommy! She perked up when Zora entered. Miss Claudette let me have ice cream because I was brave at school. Did she now? Zora raised an eyebrow at her neighbor, who shrugged unapologetically. Sugar soothes the soul, the older woman said. And she used her inhaler exactly right, all by herself. Zora knelt beside her daughter, brushing hair from her forehead. I'm proud of you, baby. How do you feel now? Better. Can we go home? I want to show you my drawing from art class. After thanking Miss Claudette profusely, Zora took Amora back to their apartment. While her daughter showed her the drawing, a surprisingly detailed rendering of their building and the people who lived there, Zora's mind kept returning to Harold Westbrook and his offer. Later, after Amora was asleep, Zora sat at their small kitchen table, Harold's business card in one hand, her phone in the other. The decision before her wasn't just about a job, it was about entering a world she didn't fully understand, with dynamics she couldn't control. But it was also about security for Amora. About never having to worry if they could afford another emergency room visit or inhaler refill. About opportunities that most single mothers in her position could only dream of. With a deep breath, she dialed Harold's number. He answered on the second ring. "Zora. I was hoping you'd call." "I've been thinking about your offer," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I'll come to the Meridian meeting tomorrow. But before I make a final decision about the position, I need to be clear about something." "Go on," Harold encouraged. "If I accept this job, it will be on my own terms. I won't be a pawn in whatever is happening between you and your family. I need this job, my daughter needs the stability it would provide, but I won't compromise my integrity for it." There was a pause, then Harold chuckled softly. "You continue to confirm my judgment, Zora Williams. Those are exactly the terms I was hoping for." "There's one more thing," Zora continued. "My daughter comes first. Always. If she needs me, I need the flexibility to be there for her." "Of course," Harold agreed without hesitation. "Family should always come first. That's something Eleanor and I believed deeply." He paused. "Would you like to bring your daughter to the office sometime? I'd love to meet her." The offer surprised Zora. "Maybe. Once things are settled." "I understand." Harold's voice grew serious again. "The car will pick you up at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the Meridian meeting. And Zora, thank you for your honesty. It's refreshing." After hanging up, Zora sat for a long time at the kitchen table, wondering if she'd just made the best decision of her life, or the most complicated one. In the bedroom, Amora slept peacefully, unaware that her mother's chance encounter with an elderly stranger might have just changed both their lives forever. For better or worse, Zora had stepped into the Westbrook family's orbit. Now she would have to navigate its gravitational pull without losing herself in the process. Have you ever uncovered someone's past that completely changed how you saw them? Or has a stranger's story ever made you reconsider your own path? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Meridian Capital offices occupied 3 floors of a modern glass building overlooking Millennium Park. As the Westbrook car pulled up to the entrance, Zora felt her stomach tighten with nerves. She'd spent half the night researching Meridian, sustainable investing, and corporate partnerships, trying to prepare herself for meetings she had no business attending. "You look nice," Harold commented as they walked toward the building. He seemed stronger today, his step more confident than it had been yesterday. Zora smoothed the front of her dress, a simple navy sheath she'd bought for interviews, paired with the blazer Patricia had lent her, which she'd promised to return today. "Thank you. I'm still not sure why I'm here, though." "For perspective," Harold replied cryptically. "And moral support." In the lobby, they were met by Patricia and Richard, both impeccably dressed and clearly surprised to see Zora actually there. "Ms. Williams," Richard acknowledged with a tight nod. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us after all." "Dad insisted," Patricia explained, her tone carefully neutral. "Shall we? James is expecting us." As they rode the elevator to Meridian's offices, Richard briefed Harold on their strategy. "We'll open with the partnership proposal as you suggested, but pivot to acquisition if they seem receptive. The regulatory concerns are real, but not insurmountable with the right approach." Harold nodded, though Zora noticed he seemed more interested in the view through the glass elevator than in Richard's strategy. When they reached Meridian's reception area, they were greeted by a young man with an easy smile. "Mr. Westbrook, what an honor. I'm Alex Chen, James's assistant. He's waiting for you in the conference room." As they followed Alex through Meridian's open concept office, Zora was struck by how different it felt from Westbrook Financial. Here, the space was bright and modern, with living plant walls, standing desks, and a diverse group of employees who looked up curiously as they passed. The conference room continued the theme, a large table made from reclaimed wood, chairs upholstered in sustainable fabrics, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the park below. James Meridian rose to greet them, a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and an athletic build. "Harold, it's good to see you up and about. We were all concerned when we heard about your health scare." "Thank you, James. It takes more than a little heart attack to keep me down." Harold shook his hand warmly, then gestured to Zora. "This is Zora Williams, my new executive assistant." James turned to Zora with genuine interest. "Ms. Williams, welcome. Alex tells me you're new to Westbrook." Very new, Zora admitted, shaking his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. As they all took seats around the table, Zora positioned herself slightly behind Harold, notebook ready, determined to observe and learn without drawing attention to herself. Richard took the lead, outlining the partnership proposal with practiced precision. Rather than a full acquisition, we're proposing a strategic alliance. Westbrook would acquire a 20% stake in Meridian, with options for increasing that stake over time. You would maintain operational independence while gaining access to our capital and client base. James listened attentively, occasionally glancing at Harold, who remained uncharacteristically quiet. When Richard finished, James leaned back in his chair. It's an interesting pivot from our previous discussions, he said carefully. May I ask what prompted the change in approach? Richard launched into an explanation about market conditions and regulatory environments, but Harold cut him off with a raised hand. The truth, James, is that we've been reconsidering our strategy. Meridian has built something special here, not just a successful business, but a mission-driven company with values that align with what Eleanor and I originally envisioned for Westbrook. He glanced at Zora briefly. Recent events have reminded me of the importance of those founding principles. James's expression softened at the mention of Eleanor. Your wife was a visionary, Harold. Her work with the foundation inspired many of our community investment initiatives. She would have loved what you've built here, Harold said with genuine admiration. Which is precisely why I don't want to absorb it into Westbrook and risk losing what makes it special. Patricia and Richard exchanged glances, clearly surprised by Harold's candor. James, however, seemed intrigued. A partnership rather than an acquisition would preserve our culture, he acknowledged. But I have to ask, what happens when you're no longer at the helm of Westbrook, Harold? Would your successors honor that vision? The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone at the table. Harold's gaze flickered to Patricia and Richard before settling on Zora. That's a fair concern, he said finally, and one I've been giving considerable thought to lately. He straightened in his chair. Perhaps we could continue this discussion over lunch? I find these conference rooms stifling after a while. James smiled. I know just the place. There's a farm-to-table restaurant in the building that sources everything locally. Their chef is a magician with seasonal ingredients. As they prepared to leave, Harold pulled Zora aside. Walk with me, he said quietly. I want your impressions so far. They fell behind the others as they exited the conference room, creating a moment of privacy. He seems genuine, Zora observed. More interested in preserving his company's mission than in maximizing the sale price. Harold nodded approvingly. Exactly. James built Meridian from scratch, just like I built Westbrook. The difference is, he never lost sight of his purpose. He sighed. I let Westbrook become something Eleanor and I never intended. It's not too late to change course, Zora suggested gently. Harold's eyes crinkled with a smile. That's precisely what I'm trying to do. At the restaurant, they were seated at a round table near windows overlooking the park. The setting eliminated the confrontational dynamic of the conference room, putting everyone on equal footing. As they ordered, Harold insisting Zora try the seasonal squash risotto, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. How did you and Eleanor decide to start Westbrook? James asked, genuinely curious. I've read the official company history, but I'd love to hear it from you. Harold's face lit up at the invitation to talk about his late wife. It was her idea, actually. I had just returned from Vietnam, finished my business degree on the GI Bill. I was interviewing with established firms, not having much luck. The economy was rough, and a lot of companies weren't eager to hire veterans. He took a sip of water, his eyes distant with memory. One night, I came home frustrated after another rejection. Eleanor, she was teaching kindergarten then, said, why work for someone else when you could build something of your own? She had $3,000 saved from her teaching job, I had about $2,000 from my military pay, and her father reluctantly loaned us another $10,000. That's not much to start a financial firm, James observed. It wasn't, Harold agreed. But Eleanor had this vision. She believed financial services shouldn't just be for the wealthy. That regular working people deserved the same quality of financial advice and opportunities. He shook his head, smiling at the memory. Everyone thought we were crazy. But within a year, we had a client list of teachers, firefighters, nurses, working people who trusted us with their futures. Zora found herself drawn into the story, seeing a side of Harold that hadn't been visible in the boardroom or his home. Here was the passionate entrepreneur, the man who had built something from nothing alongside the woman he loved. "What about you, James?" Harold asked. "What made you start Meridian?" James smiled ruefully. "Disillusionment. Honestly. I was at Goldman for 7 years, making obscene amounts of money moving other people's money around. Then the 2008 crash happened, and I saw how the financial industry had betrayed people's trust. I wanted to create a firm that aligned investments with values, where profit wasn't the only measure of success." As the conversation continued, Zora noticed Patricia watching her father with a complex expression, pride mingled with something like regret. When their food arrived, the discussion shifted to the partnership details, but the tone remained collaborative rather than adversarial. "The key for me," James said between bites of his locally sourced trout, "is maintaining our investment philosophy. We've built a client base that trusts us to put their money only in companies with strong environmental and social governance records. Which is precisely why we're interested in Meridian," Patricia interjected, surprising everyone. "Westbrook needs to evolve in that direction. Our younger clients are demanding it." Harold looked at his daughter with newfound respect. "Patricia's right. The future of finance is in sustainable, ethical investing. Eleanor saw that coming years ago." "She was ahead of her time," Patricia acknowledged softly. As lunch progressed, the outlines of a partnership began to take shape, one that would allow Meridian to maintain its identity while giving Westbrook access to its expertise in sustainable investing. By the time dessert arrived, the atmosphere had transformed from cautious negotiation to genuine collaboration. "I think we have the framework for something that could benefit both companies," James said, looking pleased. "My team can draft a preliminary agreement for review next week." "Excellent," Harold replied, then turned to Zora. "Would you mind taking notes on the key points we've discussed? I find my memory isn't what it used to be." Recognizing her cue, Zora opened her notebook and began summarizing the main elements they'd agreed upon. As she spoke, she noticed James watching her with interest. "You have a gift for distillation, Ms. Williams," he commented when she finished, capturing the essence without losing the nuance. "Thank you," Zora replied, surprised by the compliment. "It comes from years of having to explain complex medical information about my daughter's condition in terms everyone from doctors to school administrators could understand." "You have a child?" James asked. "A daughter. Amora. She's 6. Zora couldn't help the smile that spread across her face at the mention of her daughter. "6 is a wonderful age," James said warmly. "My son just turned 7. They think you hang the moon and stars at that age." The personal connection seemed to further relax the atmosphere. As they prepared to leave, James pulled Harold aside for a private word, while Richard stepped away to take a phone call. Zora found herself momentarily alone with Patricia. "You handled yourself well today," Patricia said, her tone neutral but not unkind. "Thank you," Zora replied, unsure how to respond to this unexpected acknowledgement. Patricia studied her for a moment. "My father sees something in you. I'm beginning to understand what it might be." She glanced toward Harold, who was still deep in conversation with James. "He's been lost since my mother died. Today is the most engaged I've seen him in 2 years." Before Zora could respond, Harold rejoined them, looking pleased. "James and I have agreed to meet again next week with our respective teams. I think this partnership has real potential." The ride back to Westbrook Financial was markedly different from the tense journey to Meridian. Richard was on his phone most of the time, but Patricia engaged Harold in a discussion about next steps, seeming genuinely interested in his input. Zora remained quiet, observing the subtle shift in family dynamics. When they arrived at Westbrook, Harold turned to Zora. "Would you mind coming up to my office? There are a few things I'd like to discuss." Patricia checked her watch. "Dad, you should rest. It's been a long day, and you're still recovering." "I'm fine, Patricia," Harold assured her. "Just a brief meeting with Zora, then I'll go home." Harold's office occupied a corner of the executive floor, smaller than Richard's but with better views. Unlike the sterile modernity of the rest of the building, his space felt personal, with photographs, books, and mementos accumulated over decades. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. "You did well today." I hardly said anything, Zora pointed out. Sometimes listening is more valuable than speaking. Harold settled into his chair with a sigh. James was impressed with you. He mentioned it when we spoke privately. Zora raised an eyebrow. What else did you discuss privately? Harold smiled, appreciating her directness. The future. His concerns about Westbrook's direction under Richard's leadership. His trust in me, but uncertainty about what comes after. Valid concerns, Zora acknowledged. Indeed. Harold leaned forward. Which brings me to what I wanted to discuss. I'd like you to officially accept the position as my executive assistant. Starting immediately. Despite having anticipated this moment, Zora felt a flutter of anxiety. And if I do? What exactly would you expect from me? Officially? Managing my schedule, correspondence, preparing for board meetings, accompanying me to important negotiations like today's. Harold's expression turned serious. Unofficially? Helping me ensure that Westbrook remembers its founding principles. That when I'm gone, the company Eleanor and I built continues to reflect our values. That's a lot of responsibility, Zora said carefully. It is, Harold agreed. But I've seen how you handle responsibility. How you put your daughter first. How you stopped to help a stranger even when it cost you. Those are the qualities Westbrook needs. Zora took a deep breath. Before I accept, I need to be honest about something. I'm not a financial expert. I don't have an Ivy League degree or connections in this industry. There will be people who question why I'm here. Let them question, Harold replied with a dismissive wave. I didn't build this company by worrying about other people's opinions. And your family? Patricia seemed less hostile today, but Richard clearly has reservations about me. Harold's expression softened. Patricia is more like her mother than she realizes. Once she sees past her initial suspicions, she's fair-minded. Richard. He paused. Richard is focused on quarterly profits and his own advancement. He sees my interest in you as a threat to his authority. Is it? Zora asked bluntly. Harold chuckled. Perhaps. But that's not your concern. He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew an envelope. Here's the formal offer letter. The salary and benefits are as we discussed. There's also a signing bonus that should help with any immediate expenses. Zora accepted the envelope but didn't open it. I need to think about this overnight. Talk to my daughter. Of course. Harold nodded understanding. Family comes first, always. He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Whatever you decide, thank you for today. It meant more than you know to have someone in that room who understands what Westbrook was meant to be. As Zora left the building, the afternoon sun warm on her face, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation. The opportunity before her was beyond anything she could have imagined a week ago. But it came with complications, office politics, family dynamics, and expectations she wasn't sure she could fulfill. That evening, as she and Amora sat at their small kitchen table eating spaghetti, Zora tried to explain the situation in terms her daughter would understand. Remember the job Mommy was interviewing for? Well, they've offered me a different position. A better one, with more money and really good insurance for your asthma. Amora twirled pasta around her fork with careful concentration. Is it with the old man you helped? Yes, exactly. His name is Mr. Westbrook, and he owns the company. Is he nice? Amora asked, the simple question cutting to the heart of what mattered to a 6-year-old. Zora considered this. Yes, I think he is. He misses his wife who died, and he wants to make sure the company they built together continues to help people. Like how you helped me. Amora looked up, her eyes serious. Something like that, Zora agreed, touched by her daughter's perception. If I take this job, some things will change. We might be able to move to a bigger apartment. You could have your own room. Amora's eyes widened. Really? With space for a bookshelf? Definitely space for a bookshelf, Zora laughed. But I'd be working with some people who might not be as nice as Mr. Westbrook. And I'd have a lot to learn. You always say learning new things makes your brain stronger, Amora pointed out, echoing one of Zora's frequent encouragements about schoolwork. That's true, Zora admitted, smiling at having her own words turned back on her. And if the other people aren't nice, You can just be extra nice until they have to be nice back. That's what you tell me to do with Jaden at school. Zora reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. When did you get so wise, little one? I get it from you, Amora replied with a gap-toothed grin. Later, after Amora was asleep, Zora opened the envelope Harold had given her. The offer was even more generous than she'd expected, a salary that would transform their financial situation overnight. 3 months into her role as Harold Westbrook's executive assistant, Zora had settled into a rhythm that still occasionally felt surreal. Her desk outside Harold's office had become command central for his renewed involvement in the company. Board members, department heads, and even Richard now recognized her as the gatekeeper to Harold's time and attention. The partnership with Meridian Capital had been finalized 2 weeks after that initial lunch meeting, creating a strategic alliance that industry publications had praised as innovative. Harold had insisted Zora attend every negotiation session, her perspective proving valuable as they worked through the details. Most surprisingly, Patricia had gradually warmed to Zora's presence. After witnessing her father's renewed engagement with the company, Patricia had begun including Zora in operational discussions, valuing her straightforward approach and ability to translate Harold's vision into practical steps. Richard, however, remained coldly professional, civil in Harold's presence but dismissive when the chairman wasn't around. The biggest change had come in Zora and Amora's personal lives. They had moved from their cramped apartment to a sunny 2-bedroom condo closer to downtown, cutting Zora's commute in half and placing Amora in a better school district with superior resources for managing her asthma. The little girl had blossomed in her new environment, her health improving with consistent medical care and a home free from the mold that had plagued their old building. This morning, Zora arrived at the office earlier than usual. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Harold had asked her to review his presentation on a new initiative, the revival of the Westbrook Foundation, which had languished since Eleanor's death. "Good morning, Zora," Harold greeted her, already at his desk despite the early hour. At 78, he seemed years younger than the man she'd helped on the street that October day. His color was better, his energy restored, his eyes bright with purpose. "Ready for today?" "All set," Zora confirmed, handing him a folder. "I've made the edits you suggested to the foundation proposal and prepared one-pagers for each board member." "Excellent." Harold reviewed the materials with approval. "This foundation revival means a lot to me, Zora. It was Eleanor's passion, her legacy as much as the company itself." "I know," Zora said softly. Over the past months, she'd come to understand just how deeply Harold's love for his late wife still influenced his every decision. The focus on financial literacy programs in underserved communities is powerful. It's not just charity, it's empowerment. Harold nodded, pleased by her understanding. Exactly what Eleanor always said. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach him to fish, feed him for a lifetime. But she'd add, and make sure he has equal access to the pond. Zora smiled at the quote, having heard it several times now. "The board will approve it, Harold. The preliminary feedback from the members I've spoken with has been positive. Even Richard's allies." Harold asked shrewdly. Zora hesitated. Richard had been quietly consolidating support among newer board members, positioning himself as the forward-thinking leader while subtly portraying Harold as a sentimental old man clinging to outdated ideas. "They have questions about the budget allocation," she admitted. "But the PR benefits are clear, especially with younger clients who value corporate social responsibility." Harold's phone buzzed with a text message. He checked it, his expression darkening. "Patricia needs to see me before the board meeting. Something urgent about the Meridian partnership." He stood, gathering his papers. "Hold my calls, please. I'll be back in time to review the final presentation." After Harold left, Zora used the time to double-check the board meeting materials. As she worked, her phone chimed with a message from Amora's school. Her heart skipped a beat. These calls usually meant an asthma attack, but the text was benign, a reminder about the upcoming science fair. Zora relaxed, grateful for the comprehensive health plan that had brought Amora's condition under better control. She was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice Richard enter until he was standing at her desk. "Is Harold in?" he asked, his tone clipped. "His meeting with Patricia," Zora replied, maintaining the professional courtesy she always showed him, despite his coldness. "He should be back shortly. Can I help with something?" Richard hesitated, then placed a flash drive on her desk. New projections for the foundation proposal. Harold will want to review these before the meeting. Of course, Zora said, reaching for the drive. I'll make sure he sees them. See that you do. Richard turned to leave, then paused. You've become quite indispensable to Harold, haven't you? Something in his tone put Zora on alert. I'm just doing my job, Mr. Collins. Yes. Your job. Richard studied her with calculating eyes. Tell me, Ms. Williams, how much do you know about the Meridian Partnership? I attended all the negotiation meetings, Zora replied carefully. I've reviewed the final agreements. And the side arrangement? Between Harold and James Meridian. Richard's gaze was penetrating. The one they discussed privately at lunch that first day. Zora kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced. Harold had never mentioned any side arrangement. I'm not aware of any agreements beyond what was presented to the board. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. No? Interesting. He checked his watch. The board meeting starts in an hour. Make sure Harold has those projections. After he left, Zora stared at the flash drive, unease settling in her stomach. She plugged it into her computer and opened the files, spreadsheets showing financial projections for the Foundation initiative. At first glance, they seemed to support Harold's proposal, but as she examined them more closely, she noticed discrepancies. The numbers had been subtly altered from the originals she and Harold had prepared, showing a much larger impact on quarterly profits. Before she could investigate further, Harold returned, looking troubled. Everything all right? Zora asked, noting his furrowed brow. Fine, he said dismissively, though his expression belied his words. Just some concerns about the Meridian implementation timeline. He noticed the flash drive. What's that? Richard dropped it off. Updated projections for the Foundation proposal. Zora hesitated. Harold, they're different from our numbers. They show a much bigger hit to short-term profits. Harold's expression hardened. Let me see. As he reviewed the spreadsheets, his face grew increasingly grim. This is deliberate manipulation. He's trying to undermine the proposal before the board even sees it. Can we correct it? Zora asked. We'll use our original numbers, Harold decided. I'll address any discrepancies directly in the meeting. He looked at Zora intently. Did Richard say anything else? Zora hesitated, then decided honesty was best. He asked about a side arrangement between you and James Meridian. Something private that wasn't presented to the board. Harold's face paled slightly. I see. Is there something I should know? Zora asked carefully. Harold was silent for a long moment. Not yet, he finally said. But soon. I promise. He checked his watch. We should head to the boardroom. I want to be settled before everyone arrives. The boardroom was empty when they arrived, giving them time to set up Harold's presentation and distribute the material Zora had prepared. As board members began filtering in, Harold greeted each one personally, the consummate chairman despite whatever was weighing on his mind. Richard and Patricia arrived last, entering together deep in conversation. Patricia offered Zora a brief smile, but Richard avoided eye contact entirely, taking his seat at Harold's right hand with practiced confidence. Good morning, everyone, Harold began once all 15 board members were seated. Before we address the regular quarterly business, I'd like to present a special initiative, the revival of the Westbrook Foundation. For the next 20 minutes, Harold outlined his vision with passion and clarity. The foundation would focus on financial literacy programs in Chicago's underserved communities, partnering with schools and community organizations to provide education, mentorship, and microloans for small business development. This isn't just charity, Harold emphasized. It's an investment in our community and our future client base. Eleanor understood that breaking cycles of poverty requires more than donations, it requires education and opportunity. As Harold spoke, Zora watched the board members' reactions. Most seemed engaged, even moved by Harold's passion. But Richard was typing something on his tablet, his expression unreadable. When Harold finished, Richard cleared his throat. Thank you, Harold, for that heartfelt presentation. Before we discuss further, I think we should review the financial implications. He tapped his tablet, and a screen at the end of the boardroom displayed the altered projection Zora had seen earlier. As you can see, Richard continued smoothly, while the Foundation's goals are admirable, the impact on our quarterly earnings would be significant. In the current market environment, with shareholders expecting consistent growth, this level of charitable giving could send the wrong message. Harold frowned. Those aren't the numbers we prepared, Richard. These are the projections from finance, Richard countered. Perhaps there was a miscommunication. There was no miscommunication, Harold said firmly. Zora, please distribute our original projections. As Zora handed out the correct figures, she could feel the tension in the room rising. Board members glanced between the two sets of numbers, confusion evident. As you can see, Harold continued, the actual impact on quarterly earnings is modest, less than 2%. The long-term benefits, both in community goodwill and potential client development, far outweigh the short-term cost. An older board member, George, who had been with the company since its early days, spoke up. Harold's right. The Foundation was always part of Westbrook's identity. Eleanor would be disappointed to see how we've neglected it since her passing. Richard's jaw tightened. With all due respect to Eleanor's memory, we're running a publicly traded company, not a charity. Our primary responsibility is to our shareholders. And who are our shareholders, Richard? Harold challenged. Not just faceless institutions, but pension funds representing teachers, firefighters, healthcare workers, the very people Eleanor and I built this company to serve. The debate continued, growing increasingly heated. Zora remained silent, observing the power dynamics at play. It was clear that while Harold still commanded respect, Richard had been cultivating allies on the board. The vote could go either way. Finally, Patricia spoke up. I think we're losing sight of the bigger picture here. The Foundation isn't just about charity, it's about our company's values and long-term vision. She turned to her father. Dad, what if we implement the Foundation revival in phases? Start with a pilot program this quarter, evaluate the results, then scale up gradually. The compromise seemed to shift the mood in the room. Several board members nodded approvingly. A reasonable approach, Harold acknowledged, looking at his daughter with gratitude. Richard. Put on the spot, Richard had little choice but to agree. A pilot program would allow us to measure impact before full implementation. I can support that. The vote was unanimous in favor of Patricia's compromise. As the meeting moved on to regular quarterly business, Zora caught Harold watching Richard with a calculating expression she hadn't seen before. After the meeting, Harold asked Zora to join him and Patricia for lunch in his private dining room, a small space adjacent to his office that he rarely used. As they settled around the table with sandwiches from the company cafeteria, Harold seemed preoccupied. That was a good compromise, Patricia, he said finally. Thank you for finding middle ground. Patricia nodded, her expression serious. The Foundation is important. Mom would want it restored. She glanced at Zora. But Richard isn't entirely wrong about shareholder expectations. We need to balance purpose with profit. Balance has never been Richard's strong suit, Harold observed dryly. He sees profit as the only purpose. An uncomfortable silence fell. Zora sensed there was more happening beneath the surface of this family conversation than she was privy to. Dad, Patricia said finally, Richard mentioned something concerning this morning. About the Meridian partnership. Harold's expression remained neutral. Oh. He says you and James have a private agreement, something that wasn't disclosed to the board. Patricia's voice was carefully controlled. Something that could affect control of the company. Harold set down his sandwich, his appetite apparently gone. Richard should be careful about making accusations without evidence. Is it true? Patricia pressed. Harold glanced at Zora, then back to his daughter. This isn't a conversation we should have right now. If not now, when? Patricia's composure cracked slightly. Dad, if you've done something that puts the company at risk. I've done nothing of the sort, Harold interrupted sharply. Everything I've done has been to protect Westbrook Financial and its legacy. By going behind the board's back? Behind your own family's back. Patricia's voice rose. Richard says you've given James Meridian proxy voting rights for your shares if anything happens to you. Is that true? The accusation hung in the air. Zora froze, suddenly understanding why Richard had been so interested in her knowledge of Harold and James's private conversations. Harold was silent for a long moment. Not exactly, he finally said. But there is an arrangement that would give James temporary voting authority under certain conditions. Patricia's face paled. How could you? Those shares should come to me, to your family. And they will, Harold assured her. But only if certain conditions are met. Conditions that ensure Westbrook remains true to its founding principles. What conditions? Patricia demanded. Harold sighed heavily. The foundation must be fully restored. The partnership with Meridian must be maintained for at least 5 years. And the company must establish an ethics committee with real authority to review all major investment decisions. Patricia stared at her father in disbelief. You're using your shares to control the company from beyond the grave. I'm ensuring Eleanor's legacy isn't erased the moment I'm gone, Harold countered. You've seen how Richard operates. He'd dismantle everything we built in pursuit of short-term profits. He's my husband, Patricia said coldly. And CEO of this company. You appointed him. A decision I've come to regret, Harold admitted. He's a brilliant financial mind, but he lacks the heart this company was built on. Patricia stood abruptly. I need to process this. She looked at Zora, as if suddenly remembering her presence. I assume you knew about this arrangement. No, Zora said honestly. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Patricia nodded, seeming to accept this. Dad, we'll continue this conversation later. At home. With that, she left, the door closing firmly behind her. Harold slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. That could have gone better. Harold, Zora said carefully, why didn't you tell me about this arrangement with James? To protect you, he replied simply. The fewer people who knew, the better. Richard has been looking for ways to undermine my authority for months. If he thought you were involved. But now he does think I'm involved, Zora pointed out. He specifically asked me about it this morning. Harold frowned. That's concerning. He must have found out somehow. He rubbed his temples. I'm sorry, Zora. I never meant to put you in this position. What position exactly? Zora asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Harold, what's really going on here? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with a text. He checked it, his expression darkening further. Richard has called an emergency executive committee meeting. Without me. He stood, gathering his things. I need to head this off before he does something rash. Harold, wait, Zora said, rising as well. You need to tell me what's happening. If I'm caught in the middle of a family power struggle. It's more than that, Harold interrupted. It's about the soul of this company. He moved toward the door, then paused. I need to deal with this now, but come to my house tonight. 7 o'clock. I'll explain everything then. After Harold left, Zora returned to her desk, her mind racing. The comfortable routine she'd established over the past 3 months suddenly felt like quicksand beneath her feet. She'd known there were tensions between Harold and Richard, but she hadn't realized how deep they ran, or that she might become collateral damage in their conflict. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Williams, this is James Meridian. Harold suggested I reach out. Can we meet this afternoon? It's important. Zora stared at the message, wondering what new complication this represented. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, 3 p.m. at the coffee shop across from Westbrook. The response came immediately. Perfect. Thank you. The afternoon passed in a blur of tension. Harold remained in meetings, inaccessible even to Zora. Twice, she saw Richard striding through the executive floor, his face set in grim determination. Patricia was nowhere to be seen. At 2:45, Zora gathered her things and headed to the coffee shop. James was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table with two. James Meridian was already there when Zora arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He rose as she approached, his expression grave. Ms. Williams, thank you for meeting me on such short notice. He gestured to the chair across from him. I took the liberty of ordering for you. Harold mentioned you prefer oat milk lattes. Zora sat, surprised by the personal detail. Thank you. And please, call me Zora. James nodded, settling back into his chair. I assume things are tense at Westbrook today. That's putting it mildly, Zora replied, taking a sip of her perfectly prepared latte. May I ask how you knew to contact me now? Harold called me this morning after the board meeting. He said Richard had discovered our arrangement and that things might escalate quickly. James studied her carefully. How much has Harold told you? Not enough, Zora admitted. I know there's some agreement between you two regarding his shares, but I don't know the details. James sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. I was hoping he'd have been more forthcoming with you. He speaks of you as a trusted ally. I thought I was, Zora said, unable to keep a hint of hurt from her voice. But it seems there's a lot he hasn't shared. Harold is protective, James said diplomatically. He wanted to shield you from the family politics. But given how things are unfolding, you deserve to know the truth. He leaned forward. The arrangement between Harold and me isn't just about his shares. It's about ensuring Westbrook Financial returns to its founding principles. The foundation revival, Zora nodded. He mentioned conditions, maintaining the Meridian Partnership, establishing an ethics committee. Those are part of it, James confirmed. But there's more. Harold has been concerned about Richard's leadership for some time. Not just his focus on short-term profits, but some of his investment strategies that skirt ethical boundaries. Zora frowned. What kind of strategies? Investments in companies with questionable labor practices overseas. Environmental violations that haven't hit the mainstream press yet. Nothing illegal, but certainly not aligned with what Harold and Eleanor built Westbrook to be. James took a sip of his coffee. About a month ago, Harold approached me with a proposal. If anything happened to him, I would temporarily hold voting rights for his shares, not ownership, just voting authority, until certain conditions were met. Conditions that Richard wouldn't want to meet, Zora surmised. Precisely. The foundation revival is just the beginning. Harold wants a complete ethical audit of Westbrook's investment portfolio, greater transparency with clients, and a return to the community-focused approach that originally built the company. James smiled sadly. In essence, he wants to ensure Eleanor's vision isn't forgotten. And you agreed to this arrangement? Zora asked. I did. I admire what Harold and Eleanor built. It's similar to what I'm trying to create with Meridian, just on a different scale. James hesitated. But there's a complication. The legal agreement was finalized last week, but Richard has somehow gotten wind of it. Harold believes there may be a leak in the legal department. So what happens now? Zora asked, trying to process the implications. That depends on Richard's next move, James replied. And on you. Me. Zora set down her cup. What do I have to do with any of this? Harold trusts you, Zora. More than you realize. He believes you understand the heart of Westbrook in a way his own family has forgotten. James reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. He asked me to give you this if things started to unravel. Said you'd know what to do with it when the time came. Zora accepted the envelope with reluctance. I'm just his assistant, James. I've only been with the company for 3 months. And in that time, you've had more influence on him than anyone since Eleanor died. James checked his watch and stood. I need to get back to my office. Harold mentioned his meeting with you tonight. He'll explain everything then. He extended his hand. Whatever happens, thank you for what you've done for him. He was adrift after Eleanor died. You've helped him find purpose again. After James left, Zora remained at the table, turning the sealed envelope over in her hands. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miss Claudette, who was picking Amora up from school today. All good here. Taking her for ice cream before heading home. Don't work too late. The normalcy of the message made Zora's current situation feel even more surreal. 3 months ago, her biggest concern had been finding stable employment to support her daughter. Now she was somehow entangled in a high-stakes corporate power struggle between a billionaire founder and his CEO son-in-law. She slipped the envelope into her bag without opening it and headed back to Westbrook Financial. As she crossed the lobby, her phone rang. Patricia. Zora, where are you? Patricia's voice was tense. Just returning to the office. I stepped out for coffee. Don't come up to the executive floor. Richard has security checking IDs and restricting access. He's claiming there's been a data breach. Zora stopped walking. A data breach. It's a pretext, Patricia said, her voice lowering. He's locked Dad out of the system and is trying to call an emergency board meeting to suspend him as chairman. Can he do that? Zora asked, alarmed. Technically, with enough board support, yes. But it would be unprecedented. Patricia sounded torn. Look, I don't agree with how Dad handled this situation, but Richard is overreacting. This could damage the company irreparably. What should I do? Zora asked, moving to a quiet corner of the lobby. Go to Dad's house. He'll need support right now. I'm trying to reason with Richard, but his... Patricia trailed off. Just go to Dad. Please. The call ended, leaving Zora staring at her phone in disbelief. The situation was escalating faster than she could process. With a deep breath, she headed for the exit, texting Miss Claudette that she might be late tonight. Harold's Tudor home looked the same as it had 3 months ago, but the atmosphere inside was completely different. The housekeeper who let Zora in seemed anxious, leading her not to the sunroom but to Harold's study, a book-lined sanctuary she'd only glimpsed before. Harold sat behind a massive oak desk, phone to his ear. He looked up when Zora entered, relief washing over his face. He quickly ended his call. Zora. Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd come after everything that's happened today. Patricia called me, Zora explained, taking a seat across from him. She said Richard is trying to suspend you as chairman. Harold nodded grimly. He's claiming I've breached my fiduciary duty by making a secret arrangement with a business partner. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Can he really remove you from your own company? Zora asked, still struggling to comprehend the situation. With enough board support, yes. Westbrook went public 15 years ago. I retained controlling interest through my shares, but governance rules allow for the suspension of officers who violate company bylaws. Harold rubbed his temples. I never thought Richard would go this far. What about Patricia? Whose side is she on? She's caught in the middle, Harold said with a sad smile. Torn between her husband and her father. She doesn't approve of how I handled the situation, but she also doesn't support Richard's extreme response. Zora reached into her bag and withdrew the envelope James had given her. James Meridian gave me this. Said you'd want me to have it if things started to unravel. Harold nodded, unsurprised. I asked him to hold it for me. Insurance, of sorts. What is it? Zora asked, placing the envelope on the desk between them. Evidence, Harold replied simply, of some of Richard's more questionable investment decisions. Nothing illegal, but certainly not ethical. Certainly not what Eleanor and I built Westbrook to represent. Zora stared at the envelope with new wariness. And what am I supposed to do with this evidence? That's up to you, Harold said, his voice suddenly tired. I won't ask you to fight my battles, Zora. You have your daughter to think about. Your future. My future. Zora repeated, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. What do you mean? Harold sighed heavily. Richard will almost certainly fire you if he succeeds in suspending me. You're too closely associated with me now. The reality of the situation hit Zora with full force. The stability she'd built for Amora over the past 3 months, the new home, the better school, the comprehensive healthcare, all of it could vanish overnight. I see, she said quietly. I've prepared for that possibility, Harold continued, opening a drawer and withdrawing another envelope. This contains a personal contract between you and me, not Westbrook Financial. It guarantees 2 years' salary and benefits regardless of your employment status with the company. It's already funded through my personal accounts, which Richard can't touch. Zora stared at the envelope, emotions warring within her. Part of her was grateful for Harold's foresight and generosity. Another part felt manipulated, a pawn in a game she hadn't agreed to play. Why didn't you tell me about the arrangement with James? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Why keep me in the dark if you trusted me so much? To protect you, Harold replied immediately. Plausible deniability. If you didn't know, Richard couldn't claim you were part of some conspiracy. But that's exactly what he'll claim now, Zora pointed out. I've been your right hand for 3 months. No one will believe I knew nothing. Harold had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. I should have been more forthcoming. He trailed off, looking suddenly vulnerable. After Eleanor died, I stopped trusting people. Even Patricia. The only person who seemed to understand what really mattered, was you. A complete stranger who stopped to help an old man even when it cost her something. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but Zora wasn't ready to let him off the hook. Harold, I appreciate everything you've done for me and Amora. The opportunity, the security, it's changed our lives. But I can't be a replacement for Eleanor. I can't be the moral compass for your company. I never meant to burden you with that, Harold said softly. But perhaps I did, unconsciously. He gestured to the envelopes on the desk. You have choices, Zora. You can take the personal contract and walk away from all this. Secure your daughter's future. Or you can use the evidence against Richard, help me maintain control of Westbrook, and continue the work we've started together. Those aren't my only options, Zora replied, her mind working through possibilities. What about Patricia? Have you really tried to bring her into this? Not just as your daughter, but as a partner in preserving Eleanor's legacy. Harold looked surprised by the question. Patricia has always been more aligned with Richard's vision for the company. Are you sure about that? Zora challenged. Today at the board meeting, she was the one who found a compromise for the foundation revival. She clearly cares about her mother's legacy too. Harold was silent for a moment, considering. Perhaps you're right. I may have underestimated her attachment to Eleanor's vision. Before I make any decision about these, Zora gestured to the envelopes, I want to speak with Patricia. Alone. Harold raised an eyebrow. You think she'll listen to you? I think she deserves the chance to understand what's really at stake here, Zora replied. This isn't just about control of the company. It's about family. About legacy. About what kind of future Westbrook Financial will build. After a moment's hesitation, Harold nodded. All right. I'll call her, ask her to meet with you. He reached for his phone, then paused. Whatever you decide, Zora, know that I'm grateful for these past 3 months. You've reminded me of what matters. An hour later, Zora sat in a quiet booth at a small restaurant near Patricia's home, waiting nervously. She'd called Miss Claudette to explain she'd be late, grateful once again for her neighbor's unwavering support. Patricia arrived precisely on time, her professional composure firmly in place despite the day's events. She slid into the booth across from Zora, declining a menu when the server approached. Just water, thank you, she told the young woman, then turned to Zora. This has been quite a day. That's an understatement, Zora agreed. Thank you for meeting me. Patricia studied her with shrewd eyes. Dad said you wanted to speak with me alone. That it was important. It is. Zora took a deep breath. Patricia, before I say anything else, I want you to know that I never intended to come between your family. When your father offered me the position, I saw it as an opportunity to provide for my daughter. Nothing more. But it became more, Patricia observed, not unkindly. Dad trusts you in a way he hasn't trusted anyone since Mom died. Not even me. That's what I want to talk about, Zora said carefully. Your mother's legacy. What she and your father built together. What Westbrook Financial was meant to be. Patricia's expression softened slightly at the mention of her mother. You never met her. How could you possibly know what she intended for the company? I've heard the stories. Seen the original office your father preserved. Read the articles about the foundation she established. Zora leaned forward. But more than that, I've seen how your father lights up when he talks about her vision. Financial services that empower regular people, not just the wealthy. Investments that build communities, not just portfolios. Patricia was silent for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the condensation of her water glass. Mom was the idealist, she finally said. Dad was the pragmatist. Together, they balanced each other. After she died, that balance was lost. And Richard filled the void, Zora suggested gently. Richard is brilliant at what he does, Patricia said defensively. He's made Westbrook more profitable than it's ever been. I don't doubt his financial acumen, Zora acknowledged. But is profit the only measure that matters? Is that what your mother would have wanted? The question hung in the air between them. Patricia's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing a glimpse of the daughter beneath the executive. No, she admitted quietly. Mom always said profit was a means, not an end. A tool to create positive change. She looked up at Zora. But the world is different now. Shareholders demand consistent growth. Competition is fiercer. Those are challenges, yes, Zora agreed. But they don't change the fundamental question. What kind of company should Westbrook be? What legacy do you want to preserve? Patricia studied Zora with new intensity. What exactly are you proposing? Zora reached into her bag and placed both envelopes on the table. Your father gave me these. One contains evidence of some of Richard's more questionable investment decisions. The other is a personal contract guaranteeing my financial security regardless of what happens at Westbrook. Patricia's eyes widened. And you're showing these to me because I think there's a third option beyond the false choice your father presented. Zora pushed the envelopes toward Patricia. I don't want to use this evidence against Richard. I don't want to be caught in a power struggle between your husband and your father. And I certainly don't want to see Westbrook Financial torn apart by family conflict. What do you want? Patricia asked directly. I want you to take your rightful place as the bridge between your father's vision and the modern financial world Richard navigates so well. Zora held Patricia's gaze steadily. You understand both sides. You loved your mother and respect her legacy, but you also recognize the realities of today's market. Patricia looked genuinely surprised. You think I should, what? Take over as CEO? I think you should be the mediator your family desperately needs right now, Zora clarified. Stop Richard from forcing your father out tomorrow. Convince your father to be more transparent about his concerns. Find the middle ground, just like you did with the foundation proposal today. Patricia was silent for a long moment, considering. Why are you doing this, Zora? You could take the financial security and walk away. Or you could use this evidence to cement your position with my father. Because neither of those options feels right, Zora replied honestly. Your father gave me an opportunity when I desperately needed one. I'm grateful for that. But Westbrook Financial isn't just a company to me. It's Amora's future. It's the communities it serves. It's the legacy your parents built together. She leaned forward, her voice earnest. I've been a single mother long enough to know that sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. Sometimes you have to put. The morning sun streamed through the boardroom windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished mahogany table. Zora sat in a chair against the wall, not at the table itself, present but not a participant in the emergency board meeting that was about to begin. The events of the previous night still felt surreal. After her conversation with Patricia, things had moved quickly. Patricia had called Richard, then her father, arranging a late-night meeting at Harold's home. Zora had been present for part of it, enough to see the raw emotions, the painful truths, the tentative steps toward reconciliation. Now, as board members filed into the room, the tension was palpable. They had been summoned for what Richard had described as an emergency governance issue, but few knew the full story. Harold sat at the head of the table, his posture straight, his expression serene despite the storm that had nearly engulfed him. Richard took his usual place at Harold's right, his face a careful mask of professional neutrality. Patricia was the last to enter, nodding briefly to Zora before taking her seat at Harold's left. The subtle symmetry wasn't lost on Zora, father flanked by daughter and son-in-law, the Westbrook family presenting a united front despite the fractures that had nearly shattered them. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Harold began once everyone was seated. I know many of you received concerning information from Richard yesterday about governance issues that required immediate attention. Murmurs rippled around the table. Harold raised a hand to quiet them. Those concerns were valid, he continued, surprising many in the room. As chairman of this board and founder of Westbrook Financial, I made decisions recently without full transparency. Decisions that, while well-intentioned, should have been shared with this board and with my family. Richard shifted in his seat but remained silent, honoring whatever agreement had been reached the night before. For 50 years, Harold went on, I've had the privilege of building and leading this company. Alongside my late wife, Eleanor, we created an institution that balanced profit with purpose, financial success with community responsibility. After Eleanor's death, I feared that balance was being lost. He looked directly at Richard now. My son-in-law has led Westbrook Financial to unprecedented profitability as CEO. His financial acumen is unquestionable. But in my concern for preserving Eleanor's legacy, I fail to recognize that evolution is not the same as abandonment. Change is not the same as betrayal. The board members listened intently, clearly surprised by the direction the meeting was taking. This was not the governance crisis they had been led to expect. Last night, Harold continued, my daughter facilitated a long overdue conversation between Richard and myself. We confronted hard truths, acknowledged mistakes, and found common ground. He smiled at Patricia with unmistakable pride. It seems the best of Eleanor lives on in our daughter. Patricia's composure wavered slightly at this, her eyes brightening with unshed tears. As a result of that conversation, I have several announcements to make today. Harold straightened the papers before him. First, I am rescinding the private arrangement I made with James Meridian regarding my shares. While well-intentioned, it was not the right approach to ensuring Westbrook's future. Murmurs again circled the table. Harold waited for them to subside before continuing. Second, Richard and I have agreed to a more transparent governance structure moving forward. The revival of the Westbrook Foundation will proceed as approved yesterday, with Patricia serving as its executive director while maintaining her role as COO. This announcement drew approving nods from several board members. Third, we will establish an ethics and investment review committee, comprised of board members, executives, and independent advisors, to ensure all investment decisions align with both our fiduciary responsibilities and our founding values. Harold paused, his gaze sweeping the room. And finally, I am announcing my intention to step down as chairman of the board, effective 6 months from today. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. This was clearly unexpected news, even to some board members who had been aligned with Richard. During those 6 months, Harold continued once the commotion settled, I will work with Richard and Patricia to ensure a smooth transition of leadership. At the end of that period, I am recommending Patricia Westbrook Collins as my successor as chair of the board, with Richard continuing as CEO. Zora watched the reactions around the table. Most seemed surprised but not displeased by the announcement. Richard's expression remained carefully controlled, but there was a new set to his shoulders, the tension of the past days replaced by something like resolve. This leadership structure, Harold explained, honors both our past and our future. It maintains the family connection to Westbrook Financial while recognizing the distinct skills Patricia and Richard bring to the company. As Harold opened the floor for questions, Zora felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The compromise wasn't perfect, no real solution ever was, but it honored the core of what mattered, family, legacy, and the delicate balance between profit and purpose that had made Westbrook Financial special from the beginning. The meeting continued for another hour, with board members asking questions and offering opinions on the new structure. Throughout it all, Harold, Patricia, and Richard presented a unified vision, the fractures of yesterday seemingly healed, or at least bandaged well enough to begin the healing process. When the meeting finally adjourned, board members filtered out, many stopping to speak privately with Harold. Zora remained in her seat, uncertain of her place in this new arrangement. Her role had been tied so closely to Harold. With his impending retirement, what would become of her position? As if reading her thoughts, Patricia approached, Richard a step behind her. Zora, Patricia said warmly, thank you for waiting. We'd like to speak with you, if you have a moment. Of course, Zora replied, rising from her chair. Richard extended his hand, the first genuinely cordial gesture he'd ever offered her. Ms. Williams, I owe you an apology. I misjudged your intentions and your value to this company. Surprised, Zora accepted the handshake. Thank you, Mr. Collins. I understand your concerns. Family businesses are complicated. A ghost of a smile touched Richard's lips. Indeed they are. Which is why we need people who can see clearly when family emotions cloud judgment. He glanced at Patricia. My wife tells me you were instrumental in bringing perspective to this situation. I just wanted what was best for Westbrook, Zora said simply. And for the Westbrook family. Patricia's expression softened. That's exactly why we want to discuss your future here. Dad will be stepping back gradually over the next 6 months, but we don't want to lose your contribution to the company. We'd like to offer you a new position, Richard continued, his business acumen taking over. Director of Community Engagement for the revived Westbrook Foundation. You'd work directly with Patricia, developing programs that align with Eleanor's original vision while meeting modern needs. Zora blinked in surprise. I don't have experience in foundation management. But you have something more valuable, Patricia countered. You understand the communities we want to serve because you've lived their challenges. You know what real financial empowerment looks like because you've fought for it yourself. The salary would be commensurate with your new responsibilities, Richard added. And the position would include flexibility for your daughter's needs. Before Zora could respond, Harold joined them, his face alight with approval. It was Patricia's idea, he said proudly. And a brilliant one. Who better to lead our community engagement than someone who embodies the very purpose Eleanor established the foundation to serve? Zora looked between the three Westbrooks, emotion welling in her throat. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Harold encouraged. Eleanor would have adored you, Zora. She would have seen in you what I saw that day on the street, someone who puts people before profit, compassion before convenience. The foundation needs rebuilding from the ground up, Patricia added. It's been neglected since Mom died. This is a chance to honor her legacy while creating something new, something that addresses today's challenges. Zora took a deep breath, considering the opportunity before her. It wasn't what she had expected when she'd missed that interview 6 months ago to help an elderly stranger. It was something better, a chance to not just secure her own future, but to help others secure theirs as well. Yes, she said finally, her voice steady with conviction. I'd be honored to accept the position. 1 year later, the community center in South Chicago buzzed with activity. Tables lined the main hall, each staffed by volunteers from Westbrook Financial offering different services: budget counseling, small business loan information, college savings plans, first-time homebuyer assistance. Zora moved between the tables, clipboard in hand, making sure everything ran smoothly. The quarterly financial empowerment fair had been her idea, bringing Westbrook services directly to underserved neighborhoods rather than expecting people to come downtown to the intimidating corporate headquarters. Ms. Williams. A familiar voice called from the entrance. Zora turned to see Miss Claudette entering, leading a group of neighbors from their old apartment building. We made it. Zora greeted her former neighbor with a warm hug. I'm so glad you could come. There's a workshop on retirement planning starting in 15 minutes that I think you'll find interesting. I'm more interested in that small business table, Miss Claudette confided. Been thinking about turning my baking into something official, you know. That's wonderful. Zora exclaimed. Let me introduce you to James. He specializes in small business development for women entrepreneurs. As she led Miss Claudette toward the appropriate table, Zora spotted Amora across the room, sitting with Harold at a children's financial literacy station. The 7-year-old was earnestly explaining something to the elderly man, who listened with rapt attention, nodding seriously at whatever wisdom she was imparting. The sight warmed Zora's heart. Over the past year, Harold had become something of a grandfather figure to Amora, often stopping by their new home for dinner or taking the little girl to museums on weekends. His health had improved significantly since stepping down as chairman 6 months ago, the reduced stress and renewed purpose bringing color back to his cheeks and spring to his step. Patricia approached, elegant as always but more relaxed than she'd been a year ago. As board chair, she had indeed proven to be the perfect bridge between Westbrook's founding values and its future growth. This is impressive, Zora, she said, surveying the busy community center. We've had over 200 people come through already. And most of them have signed up for at least one service or workshop, Zora added proudly. People want financial security and knowledge, they just need access and trust. Mom would have loved this, Patricia said softly. This is exactly what she envisioned for the foundation. Speaking of which, Zora said, checking her watch, Richard should be arriving soon for the small business grant announcements. As if on cue, Richard entered the community center, looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit but making an effort to engage warmly with the community members who approached him. The past year had seen a gradual thawing between him and Zora, a professional respect developing as they each recognized the value the other brought to Westbrook. Mommy. Amora called, running over with Harold following at a more sedate pace. Mr. Harold says I can be a financial planner when I grow up if I want to. Is that so? Zora smiled, smoothing her daughter's braids. And is that what you want to be? Amora considered this seriously. Maybe. Or maybe a doctor. Or an astronaut. I haven't decided yet. You have plenty of time to figure it out, Harold assured her, winking at Zora. The important thing is that you'll have options. Options. Such a simple word for something that had once seemed so elusive to Zora. Financial security. Educational opportunities. Healthcare without worry. The chance to build a future based on choices rather than necessities. As the event continued around them, Zora found a quiet moment to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The autumn day was crisp and clear, reminiscent of that morning a year ago when she'd been hurrying to an interview, only to have her life changed by an act of kindness toward a stranger. Harold joined her a few minutes later, his breath forming small clouds in the cool air. "Penny for your thoughts." Zora smiled. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from a year ago. How one small decision changed everything." "For both of us," Harold agreed. "If you hadn't stopped to help me that day. If you hadn't collapsed on those steps." Zora countered with a gentle smile. "Eleanor always said there are no coincidences," Harold mused, gazing up at the clear blue sky. "She believed people come into our lives exactly when we need them." "And do you believe that?" Zora asked. Harold considered the question. "I believe that kindness creates ripples we can't always see. That sometimes, the most important choice we make isn't about business or money, but about whether to stop and help someone in need." He turned to Zora, his eyes bright with emotion. "You gave me back my purpose, Zora. Reminded me why Eleanor and I built Westbrook in the first place." "And you gave Amora and me security and opportunity," Zora replied. "I'd say we're even." Harold chuckled. "More than even. Partners in something important." Inside the community center, they could see Richard at the microphone, preparing to announce the small business grant recipients. Patricia stood beside him, the Westbrook Foundation's new logo displayed prominently behind them, a bridge spanning a river, symbolizing the connection between financial resources and community needs. "We should go back in," Zora said, nodding toward the door. "The future is waiting." As they walked back into the warmth of the community center, Zora felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. 1 year ago, she had missed a job interview to help an elderly stranger, never imagining how that simple act of kindness would transform her life. Now she stood at the center of a renewed mission, helping others find the security and opportunity she had once so desperately sought herself. Sometimes, Zora reflected as Amora ran to meet her at the door, the most important crossroads in our lives don't announce themselves with fanfare. They appear as simple choices, to stop or to hurry past, to help or to focus on our own concerns. And in those quiet moments of decision, we reveal not just who we are, but who we might become. Has a moment of kindness ever changed the course of your life? Or have you been the recipient of unexpected generosity that transformed your circumstances? Life's most powerful moments often come disguised as simple choices. Share your story in the comments below.